up, everybody? Sven Diesel here. We're going to be tying up Pat Dorsey's Manhatten Midge. This is a pattern of his that's extremely effective and been proven over and over again. I'm going to just be adding a tungsten bead instead of a glass bead, and also some wire hotspot in the rear. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm tying up some 16s tonight, and so that's usually a little bit big for this pattern, but I like to have some oversized one for some still water. And so we'll go ahead and start putting our tungsten bead in, and we're going to put that in with a small end first, working our way of making sure that tungsten bead goes up towards the eye, that we don't drop it off because this is a barbless hook. And then we'll go ahead and put it in the vise at a downward angle, about a 30 degrees, so that it keeps that tungsten bead there, but also will help us when we're tying into the bend of the hook. We've got some Semperfli wax thread and a 12/0 in black. The black thread will be our body, so if you want to do a different color body, just use a different color thread. And I'm going to start with touching wraps, working my way down the hook shank here, and then once I get about 5 to 7 wraps, I'll work my way back up to the bead with touching wraps, and then I'll work my way back down, keeping that tag end in because that helps with the touching wraps, and then I'll go about 5 to 7 more when it starts to get into the bend, and then I'll work my way back up to the bead. And what we're doing is we're building the taper of this body just with touching wraps. And so for this particular pattern, we're going to be going with a pink theme. This is baby pink and 0.1 millimeter. I really love this small wire. It's a really strong wire, but you know, if you're not careful, you can break it off when tying, but it adds really good segmentation to this fly. So we'll go ahead and tie this in on the top of the hook shank, and with working our way down the hook shank with touching wraps. And I'm not pulling on the wire at this point just because I don't want to pull it out. And then we're going to start going with some tighter wraps here, and then I'm going to lift the wire and then use it like I did the tag end of my thread. That way the wire slides the wraps together, so we're getting touching wraps without really having to work at it. We're just letting the wire do the work for us. And then once we get about to here, I'm going to start working my way back up the hook shank with touching wraps to the best of my ability. It's really hard at this size and even smaller to see if you're getting touching wraps, if you're kind of going on faith, but we'll work our way back up towards the bead. And so what we've done is we built that taper with our thread wraps, and then we'll get up here and we'll do a little bit of a half hitch just to secure our thread in case I bump it when doing the wire wraps, and I just don't want that thread to fall off or get in my way. So next step is we're going to look at this taper, and you can see I've got that first segmentation, the second segmentation, and then the full thing. So ideally that first step has now been wrapped over 3 times, and so that's how we build our taper. Now with this wire, to get the hot spot, I'm going to wrap down the hook shank, so towards the point a little bit more, 3 to 4 wraps, and then I'll jump up and then start right into my segmentation, trying to keep these wraps as even as possible. If anything, a little bit tighter here towards the back, and then kind of getting bigger as we work our way up towards the hook, towards the bead. And then as we get up towards there, just working on consistency and not trying to get hung up on our thread. I'll do a full wire wrap here just to kind of hold it in place. It's a little habit I've been in of just making sure I do that full wire wrap so that it does not come out. And then I'll secure that with some behind and in front wraps. Go ahead and trim that out, and then we're ready to cover this body in some resin. The resin is what's going to make this ultra durable and that wire just stay in place. It also adds a little bit of that non-smooth body, the ribbing. And so I'll just go ahead and put that on. If you get a little too much, just brush it off with your finger and make sure you don't touch your important shirt or your shorts with that until you have a chance to wash your hands. But we cured that up. It doesn't need a full cure at this point because we're going to use a little bit more resin later on, and we're going to use some Krystal flash now to create this little poof ball right here behind the bead. And so I'm just taking one strand out, and I'll cut it, and without stretching it, I'm just going to fold it in half and then pinch really hard right here and then fold it in half again. And then what you do is you want to keep that little poof ball and then kind of orient it so that it's going to be parallel with the hook shank, and then we will go ahead and do about 3 to 4 wraps to secure it in place, making sure it's on the top of the hook shank. And if it's a little long, just go ahead and pull it through, but be careful because that Krystal flash is going to want to twist as you pull it, and that's why we want to make sure that you do those first 2 or 3 wraps kind of loose. You can see I got a little poof ball right there. I'll go ahead and wrap this Krystal flash back over itself, do about 3 or 4 wraps to create a nice little security for that Krystal flash, but more importantly a flat surface to tie in our Peacock. And that is the last step of this fly. Is we're going to take some Peacock. I just took it right off the stem there, and we'll go ahead and tie this in right here on the top of the shank with about 3 or 4 wraps, and then we will end our thread right there towards the front. And Peacock's very interesting, especially on this size. I want to make sure that I orient it right so we're not seeing as much stem, so that those fibers are going the way I want them to. And sometimes I should probably retie this in, but we'll just go for it. Let's just see how it goes once we get a few wraps down. And so I'll just start, and you want to get roughly 3 to 4 wraps. Usually I get 3 wraps, and then I try to squeeze one that slides off the bead into the other ones. And then I make sure that I tie it off, and then do a couple in front, another behind. So now it's been tied behind twice, and then I'll go ahead and trim that out. And then the last step to make this super durable is I'm going to rub a little bit of resin on my thread and then do some thread wraps before I whip finish. That way it's just making that resin soak in, grab that Peacock, grab everything, and it's just going to create a really nice solid fly. And that way we can cure it. We're done. We don't have to worry about head cement drying, and we'll just do a 3-turn whip finish while that resin's still wet, making sure to kind of slide it off the bead into the Peacock that we're not trapping fibers down. And then I'll tighten it around, trim it off as flush as I can, and then we cure it up. And then this is where we're going to give it, the fly a full cure. I just let it sit for about 5 to 10 seconds, or as recommended by the manufacturer of the resin, and then we are good to go. That is the Manhatten Midge. You can tie it up in about 1,000 different colors, rotating wire, bead size, and fish it as a dropper, and hope it catches some fish for you.